Next, from Springfield, we go one-on-one with a senior vice president of Ameren and hear why the utility says Governor Quinn was wrong when he recently vetoed the electric rate increase bill that holds the promise of upgrading the power grid, which Ameren and ComEd say would allow consumers to better control the amount they spend on electricity. This runs about 35 minutes. Craig Nelson, you're Senior Vice President with Ameren Utilities, and we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us on the Illinois Channel. One of the major issues that came up in the spring legislative session was the whole issue of changing the regulatory environment, the regulatory bill. Often the Chicago media refers to it, and I'll say for our Chicago area viewers, as the ComEd bill, but it's really electric utility regulation bill. It passed in September. The governor vetoed that bill, and now as we sit here in September, the fall veto session of the legislature will take this bill up. So just wanted to lay that foundation out for the viewers to say what's happening legislatively. Let's talk about what the bill would do from the perspective of Ameren and ComEd. Why should this bill pass?
This bill provides significant benefits to the customers across the state of Illinois, in ComEd's territory and in Ameren Illinois Company's territory. So substantial benefits. We believe the benefits far outweigh the costs of this bill. And we can talk at length over this next few minutes about the benefits for customers.
Well, let's talk about it. You know, generally speaking, a bill is trying to fix something that's wrong. What's wrong that you're trying to fix?
Two things are wrong, very simply. One is the electric grid really hasn't changed much since the time of Thomas Edison. So we've had a grid that's worked very well for 100 years, but now we're in the 21st century, and the demand and the expectations around electricity usage are so much higher than they were. We need to invest in the electric grid significantly. So that's one thing that needs fixing. The other thing that needs fixing is the regulatory process. It's much too unpredictable, and investors don't like it. We need to fix it.
So a couple of things. One, let's talk about, there's two aspects to the bill. One is you touched on this. One is regulatory, and the other is upgrading the grid. As a way of background for, I think, all of us who don't think about power grids, we just plug our things in the wall and the electricity's there, and we kind of take it for granted, which has been really a blessing in the United States. Maybe in some other countries they don't do that. The history of the electric grid started with Edison, and he wired cities. And basically, there was no grid per se. You had cities being electrified 100 years ago, city by city. We slowly interconnected these cities, as I understand it, and so created a grid, but it was a patched together system, never a system that was designed from the ground up to be wired. So when we talk about creating the smart grid, let's go a little more in depth. Why is that a good thing, and what as consumers would we have that we don't have now?
Well, it's the smart devices. If Edison were here and he walked around and looked at utility poles and utility wires, he would understand it immediately, what was happening. We have all this technology, electronic technology, computer technology, that we've not applied as well as we can to the grid. We can put smart devices on the grid that tell us when customers are receiving power or not receiving power. We can put intelligent devices on the grid that actually reduce the number of outages, prevent outages, and these devices also help us shorten the period of an outage. Think of being on a hill overlooking a city at night. You've seen movies of this where the outage cascades, through one section of the city, then another section, and then another section. These devices can actually prevent the cascade from happening, prevent outages, reduce the number of outages for customers. It's a significant benefit for them.
A couple of years ago, I don't remember the exact date, we had an outage that cascaded in the East Coast. Would this provide a buffer against, if we had this in Illinois, against Illinois being impacted by that kind of cascading blackout?
I don't know if it would have prevented that blackout, but I am confident from talking to our engineers and experts in the field that it does prevent cascading. It limits the extent of where an outage takes place, and because of the real-time information we have about who's out and who's not out, of service, we're able to restore power more quickly. Get the utility men right to the place where it needs fixing, where there's a problem at a substation or whatever, and get it fixed, rather than utility men driving around the system trying to find out what needs fixing. So,
And that's, part of the problem in trying to understand Ameren's position is we as consumers don't understand the current system. So I'm trying to make a
Right.
contrast to where are we and again, what are we trying to fix? If I use an analogy, if there's a fire in the city, we have an alarm go off in a certain part of the city, so the fire people know where to send the firemen. Is the problem with Ameren that, or not just Ameren, but with the electric providers, that if there's an outage, you don't know where it is?
that's a good analogy. It helps us pinpoint where the outage is, what the problem was, and even better yet, because of the way that the devices work, it actually can prevent the outage from happening.
Now, there's also an aspect that I've heard, and again, I want to make sure we're talking about anytime we have some, some benefit, there might be 5 or 6 benefits, but there's maybe 1 or 2 that are the primary benefits. So we've talked about knowing where the outages are. I presume that's one of the big ones.
That's one. Yes, it's a big one for customers because it prevents outages. And we've used a national study that the Department of Energy did back in 2009, I believe, to identify the benefit from improved reliability, and it's significant, not just for residential customers. The freezer doesn't unthaw and your food doesn't unthaw and spoil. Of course, that's a benefit, but it actually keeps businesses up and running, and the productivity savings and the dollar savings for businesses is very substantial. So that's a big benefit for big and small customers.
I want to try to see it from Ameren's standpoint for a moment. And I want to remind the viewers that the regulations have changed over the last decade. So these days, Ameren and ComEd are in the transmission business. They move electricity from point A to point B. They don't produce it.
That's correct. Ameren Illinois Company delivers electricity. Ameren Illinois Company does not own generating plants. The law requires us to buy electricity on the open market through a state agency, the Illinois Power Agency. So we buy electricity exactly equal to what our customers use, and no more and no less. And then we pass on the cost of those purchases, exactly what our cost is. That's what's passed through to customers. So we are in the delivery business, and our focus of our discussion here is how to do the delivery business better.
The other thing I think viewers ought to understand is that electricity is not stored anywhere. There's no bank of electricity. The lights that are burning in this room, the electricity was generated seconds ago. So it's a constant flow. And we have that term base load, which is basically electricity is being produced to provide the normal usage.
Right.
If there's a hot day and electricity demand goes up with air conditioning, other power is brought into the system.
That's correct, and that's called peak usage, and that gets into another benefit. Electricity becomes very pricey during those peak periods because there's a limited amount of generating facilities and there's a high demand at that peak period. So economics, the way it works is the price goes up during peak periods. That's one of the key benefits, as we haven't talked about smart meters yet. Automated meters, smart meters, and
everyone knows we have meters, first of all, on our house.
Right.
And right now we have someone from the utility company come out and physically read how much electricity, and it says we use so many units of electricity over the last month.
There's dials on there, and a meter reader goes out and reads it once a month. Now, in the 21st century, we have smart meters that can electronically send information to the utility, and then price signals can be sent to the home. And if the homeowner wants to, the homeowner can actually control usage of appliances through the signals that we send or someone else sends. And the beauty of having the smart meters in place is that the customer can choose to shift usage from high price times during the day to lower price times. And it could be as simple as doing the laundry at 6 or 7 in the morning rather than at 3 p.m. when a hot day in the summer when the price of electricity is very high. Or Some customers choose to actually reduce their usage. When they get the information about the usage from all their appliances and they see they've got 2 or 3 refrigerators, they may choose to get rid of a refrigerator and actually reduce their cost during the year.
Now, I think people may understand that, going back to our earlier points, the electric grid system that was established under Edison and that we've kind of patched together, the average person might go, I can understand the big picture that we want to upgrade just as we upgraded our roads over the last 100 years.
Right.
On the other hand, they might say, I don't want to do my laundry at 6 a.m. I want to do it when it's convenient for me. What's wrong with the flat rate pricing that we have now? Why can't we upgrade the grid and yet keep flat rate pricing?
My personal opinion is we can have both. If a customer wants flat rate pricing, they should be able to have flat rate pricing. That's my personal opinion. At the same time, customers that want to save money by shifting usage or reducing their demand should have the right to do that. And these electric smart grid meters help them do that.
All right, so one of the things with the grid aspect of it is we will have the smart grid that also allows different technologies to be employed, not only as we've discussed, but as I understand it, some of the appliance makers might make refrigerators that can be read, or maybe you can be at work and turn on your crock pot from work.
Right.
Things like that, so that there's a two-way communications, in a sense, the way we've become accustomed to with the internet, where we can do any number of things. I have a friend who has a business, and he can go on his laptop at home and look at his
Right.
security cameras at work. So in that sense, it's a two-way communications. The smart grid would allow for different applications like that. It would, as I understand it, get rid of the meter man, because you wouldn't need to have someone physically going out, so there's a cost benefit to the utility. Where are we, on the other hand, as far as, we have, everyone knows, increased our electric usage through the internet, through all these machines. Where are we as a society in being able to meet the growing electrical demand? To what extent should we as consumers be concerned about that going forward? We don't want to go to where 5 or 10 years from now,
Right.
we're having to ration energy and the utility companies say, well, we tried to warn you, but no one was listening. Is that part of this discussion? Because, what the critics would say is, you're just gouging people. It's,
Right.
the governor has been critical of this. That's why he vetoed this. Is that part of the discussion as far as a society, us being able to have the kind of infrastructure, electrical infrastructure that we need to meet the growing demand?
Absolutely it is. Senate Bill 1652 has language in it that would actually increase the amount of energy efficiency savings for customers above and beyond what we have now. And keep in mind that Illinois is in the forefront and has one of the most aggressive laws in regard to energy efficiency savings across the country. And Senate Bill, if enacted into law, if there is an override in the Senate and the House and it's enacted into law, the energy efficiency standard changes so we can even get more savings for our customers and reduce usage and which thereby reduces the price of electricity for everyone.
Now, you say energy savings, but on the other hand, won't the rates for the average consumer go up?
Two things are happening, countervailing things. Sure, when we spend $625 million on investment, as 1652 would require us to do, to invest in the infrastructure, the delivery rate goes up. But at the same time, there's several types of savings that come into play. As you've talked about, there's less meter reading if we install these automated readers, so meter reading costs go down. There's fewer outages, so the time we spend repairing outages goes down. And then we get into the power supply side, the energy saving side. If customers take advantage of smart meters and reduce usage or shift usage, the component of the bill related to electricity itself goes down. And we haven't talked about another valuable component for savings either. It's optimizing the voltage. As we've talked about before, we simply supply the electricity that our customers use. And there's no storage, as you mentioned earlier. So power plants are generating electricity. Our customers are using electricity. And voltage control is another thing that would be improved with these smart devices. Right now, we're probably pumping in a little bit extra into the electric grid to make sure the customers have the right voltage so their lights don't dim and their appliances don't blink and all of that.
So you got to have a little margin of error so that otherwise it's
Yes.
a roller coaster of electrical lighting, right?
And the beauty of investing in the grid with 21st century technology is we can optimize that voltage control, actually pump less electricity into the grid and still maintain the right voltage for our customers. So another big savings for our customers.
Now going back, and again, there's certain issues that people are concerned about and why they're opposing it. So it's going to be it's going to be more money to the average consumer. On the other hand, how much money are we talking about?
Well, we believe, before I answer the question about how much per customer, we firmly believe the savings to the customer is greater than the cost to the customer. And let me use an example.
And here's where I am interrupting you, but the
no
point
problem.
Is that,
I interrupted you.
Why I want you to go with your answer is because I'm getting a little confused hearing what you're saying.
Right.
If their rates are going up, they're going to have a hard time understanding how are they saving. So
Right.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Let me go ahead and we'll go back to, because I was initially asking how much will their rates go up a month?
Okay. So let me answer that first, and then I'll talk about offsetting savings.
Okay.
So remember, there's two components of the bill, our delivery piece on the bill. And then there's another component on the bill, the actual cost of the electricity commodity. So let's talk about the delivery piece of the bill. How much will that go up? And let's use a typical residential customer that uses 10,000 kWh per year.
Kilowatts.
Kilowatt hours per year. And
I'm sorry again, it's 10,000.
10,000 kilowatt hours per year.
Okay.
A typical residential, nobody's exactly typical, but that's a typical usage. Right. So we think over this 10-year period, the cost to that typical customer will go up by $3.40 per year on average. So
per year?
Per year. Let me be clear. So $3.40 per year, like the cost of a gallon of gas. So in the first year, this is on average, a $3.40 increase to the customer in the delivery portion of the bill. Second year, another $3.40, so you're at $6.80. Third year, another $3.40, so you're at $10.20, I believe. Yes. But by the time you get to year 10, you're at $34 per year more. But at that point in time, we believe the savings are at least $40 per year to the customer, that the savings more than offset the increase in the delivery cost. And this, just tick off the savings I'm talking about the fact that smart meters would be there and customers reduce their usage or the price by shifting. This voltage control, actually putting less electricity into the system, so reducing the power supply part of the bill for that. And then also importantly, the number of reduced outages. And we think, well, the law requires us to reduce outages by 300,000 outages per year. Significant savings for the customer. So those three components make up the bulk of that $40 of savings. Per
I
year
want to
savings.
belabor this point a little bit because I think people are easily confused by it. So let me again make an analogy because I think sometimes people get confused by the electrical aspect of it.
Okay.
If the price of apples went up but I ate less apples, I might be saving on how much I spend a year on apples. So their rate per kilowatt may be going up, but if they end up using less electricity as they are currently, their actual expenditures on electricity would go down. Is that what your point is?
That's one part of it, yes. I don't like the analogy of the apples. For instance, I'm on time of use pricing, and I'm living and I'm not giving up much at all in my household. I'm still, for 4 teenage daughters, there's lots of appliances running. So the customers can use energy more wisely by shifting to the off-peak periods. And those that choose to reduce their consumption can do so. But
yeah,
there's plenty of savings for those unrelated to reducing usage. the voltage control, and the fewer outages per year.
Right, you're right, and to bring that up. It's sometimes shifting the time that you might do it. Again, people may or may not like it. It's also, though, you have the whole program, Act on Energy. If people use some newer refrigerators that draw less electricity or change their light bulbs to the newer units that draw less, that's other ways that they can cut down. But they may be more aware, you would argue, if they're seeing the cost per use.
If they knew that their refrigerator cost them $100 or $150 a year to run, some would choose to have one fewer refrigerator in the home.
Or get rid of grandma's refrigerator and maybe put one in that costs $75 a year to run.
Yes, it's much more efficient, yes.
So to that end, even though your rates would go up as a utility company, the consumer can offset that rate increase, at least you would argue. I'm not arguing, but I'm just trying to clarify your point.
No, you've argued it well there. Yes, you clarified it. Thank you.
All right. Now, what about, on the other hand, there is the regulatory aspect of the bill, and you have in a statement here a fact sheet that Ameren has, that it would allow the state's electric utilities to modernize the energy infrastructure by streamlining the existing regulatory process. As I understand it, currently, the regulatory process for a rate increase may take up to a year to go through the cycle. That allows the consumer groups or the Attorney General's office or anyone else to prepare their remarks and get involved. The bill, I believe, would bring that down to as little as 45 days.
No, that's not accurate, and
Okay.
that's some of the miscommunication out there. There would be an annual rate case process. Instead of the 11-month review, the ICC, the Illinois Commerce Commission would have an 8-month review. As we look at other states, that's typical.
So you're saying it goes from 11 months to 8 months?
And it needs some streamlining. Before I talk about what's not fixed, for example, in our last rate case, we filed 800,000 pieces of paper. I think some streamlining is possible. We could do it with a few pieces of paper in 3 months shorter time. In fact, one could argue that there's more regulation, because right now we file every couple of years. With Senate Bill 1652, there would be an annual filing. So the Illinois Commerce Commission is reviewing our actual costs on an annual basis, an 8-month review every year of our actual costs. And that's what we're trying to recover under Senate Bill 1652, our actual costs from the previous year.
The Attorney General's office and others are taking a position that this would basically allow you to circumvent and gut the regulatory process so that the utility companies could raise their rates. There wouldn't be enough time for the opponents of a rate increase to have their say, and the consumer would end up paying more money, one. Secondly, I think they would argue that some of these savings that we've alluded to before would be illusory and
Right.
not necessarily show up. And then once this system that you're proposing and that this bill would institute is in place, that it would be hard to get rid of it. What say you about that?
Well, there was a lot packed into that statement, so let me talk
Go ahead and click them off
talk
one
about
at a
two
time.
of them. I've already talked about the regulatory process where there's an 8-month review where the staff of the Illinois Commerce Commission, the Attorney General's office, and any other interveners that want to can enter the case and do exactly what they're doing under current law. They can give us data requests, they can file briefs, they can do testimony. So the full regulatory process is continuing. It's just that it's 3 months shorter, 8 months versus 11, and it's annual. So I find it misleading to say that the regulatory process has been gutted, because it has not. So, but then you also talked about something else. It brought to mind the safeguards in the bill that, we'll spend all this money and what do customers really get? Well, there are safeguards that are built into the bill. Probably one of the most important safeguards is that the legislature would put a cap on our rate increases. So from 2012 through 2014, if we increase rates by more than 2.5% per year, Senate Bill 1652 process is done with. So there's a hard cap on our price increases. Then in 2017, there's another look by the legislature at has it increased by more than 2.5% a year. So there's a price cap protection, but beyond that, there's other really good protections. There are performance standards that are built into the law that the utility has to meet or it's penalized, and these performance standards provide the benefits to the customers.
What kind of performance
And
standards?
there's 5 of them, 6 of them. One is that we have to reduce the number of outages by 20% over that 10-year period. That means 300,000 fewer outages. That's number one. We have to shorten the duration of outages by 15%, which is significant. So when a customer is out, 15% improvement in the time the customer's out. Then we have to analyze the customers that have service interruptions greater than average, and we have to make a 75% improvement in that. We have to reduce the number of estimated bills by 56%, and the smart meters help us do that because they read them electronically each month, and we won't have as many estimates. And another safeguard is that we have to reduce the bad debt expense incurred by $3.5 million.
In 2007, when we had the end of the 10-year cycle of the electric, so-called electric dereg,
Right.
I think the utility companies would say we were still regulated, it was just electric re-reg. But electric rates spiked. There was a huge uproar around the state. I bring that up because I think people who oppose this bill don't necessarily get into the minutia that we're getting into, but have an emotional fear that they're going to be driven out of business if they're commercial, or that, if it's a grandma, they're going to have to be living in the dark with candles because of what happened back in '07. Is that address that concern that is out there?
Yes, I lived through that. I know it was tough on consumers, it was tough on us, and I think the legislature came up with a very good solution with the rate relief legislation and the Illinois Power Agency solution, a very good solution. Once again, I believe the legislature is coming up with a very good solution. It's finding a way to modernize the grid and fix the regulatory process, but it's putting the safeguards that we just talked about in place where the amount that we can increase the customer's bill is capped each year for the first 2 years, and then over the 5 years there's a legislative look at it. So that cap on price, hard cap for 2 years, and then a review after 5 years is a major protection for customers. And then, as I just listed these performance standards for utilities, the customers will get the benefits because if we don't meet these performance standards, then our return on equity allowed under the law is reduced. So our shareholders and our board of directors will make certain that we achieve these objectives because they don't want their return reduced.
What do you say to those who are going to say, we look at the annual report of the parent companies and they're making plenty of money, they don't need an upgrade, they've got the cash flow to invest in their own system. After all, it's their business, they're in the transmission business. Why don't they take the money they are already making, the profits, and put them back into the business?
I love to talk about that. Let's just apply it from Ameren, Illinois Company. So let's say that Ameren, Illinois Company, for whatever wrong reason, said, we want to subsidize our affiliate in Missouri, the Missouri utility. The regulators and the law of Illinois would not allow us to do that. There are protections in place. In the same way, our Missouri utility, under the law in Missouri and the Missouri regulators, cannot subsidize Illinois. Each company stands on its own as far as regulation and allowed revenue, and we cannot subsidize each other under the law. Ameren Corp also has a merchant generation business where power plants that used to be in the utility are now in the free market. And believe me, right now, there's no money for subsidy in that business. These are very hard times for merchant generation businesses, and there is no money to subsidize, nor should they subsidize, because we would not subsidize them, they should not subsidize us. So each business unit stands on its own under the law.
this may not be your area of expertise, but to point out, we talked about the regulatory environment, the electric dereg bill of 1997, and then they made changes that we referred to in 2007. One of the things, though, that came out of the 97 dereg is that we have A, Ameren and ComEd not producing, as we touched on, you're in the transmission business.
Right.
And B, we have various other companies around the state now competitively selling electricity both to commercial interest, and now increasingly it's just coming to the residential business, so that there are, and I want to remind consumers of this, there are other companies that are going to be trying to say, switch from buying your company from company A to company B to us. So competition is coming to the marketplace.
Right.
To what extent does that fit into this conversation in this bill?
There's no direct impact. But by the way, we support competition and have been active proponents of it, and most of our larger customers have switched. And it really doesn't impact us whether the customer buys his or her electricity from us or buys it from another supplier, because our profit margin is from the delivery business. And as I said earlier, we just pass through the cost of power supply. We want our customers to go out and find the cheapest source of electricity. We help them do that. We want to be their trusted energy advisor that advises them how to do that. So, indirectly, in a way, the market may gain better and more useful information with smart devices out there and smart meters that help competition in the state and help customers save money.
Before time runs out and we end, as part of this upgrade in the smart grid over a period of time, I often look at these power lines and they look like the old telegraph poles of the 1840s. Will we move forward and be burying these so that we get rid of the lines that go to all the houses? And after all, then when we get ice storms and
Right.
whatever other storms, that's one of the reasons why we lose electricity, because we have them exposed to the elements.
Yeah, when we provide electricity to new subdivisions, we go underground to prevent outages. And I know that part of the legislation in the Chicago area calls for a lot of undergrounding. We probably won't do as much of that. Switch overhead electricity to underground. We'll do some of it, but that's not the major focus of the upgrade and modernization and smart grid that we want to put in place.
Greg, one more thing. As we look at this statement of benefits you have, one of the things that are mentioned are jobs, and of course, obviously with unemployment being as high as it is. What impact would this have? You say statewide benefits here creates over 2,000 jobs. What jobs would be created, and over what period of time would they be created?
Okay, good. Yeah, we've talked about how the bill modernizes the grid, how it fixes the regulatory process, but it's a jobs bill as well. And across the state, over 2,450 jobs would be added. And in our case, in our service territory, we're talking about 450 jobs that we would add during the peak program year. Remember, it's a 10-year program, and the law requires that we add 450 jobs during that peak program year. And you asked what kind of jobs? Well, it's a utility lineman job, it's union jobs, it's management jobs within the utility. And then we have lots of suppliers and vendors that we've talked to about spending $625 million, and so they would be adding jobs. Those are called induced jobs under the legislation. And then we also have some vendors that provide contractors to us, and so we add more contractors. So employees, union jobs in the company, management jobs in the company, hiring more contractors, and then jobs that are added because businesses are selling $625 more million of material to us so that we can invest it in the grid. So many kinds of jobs and a big boost to the economy.
Let me ask you to clarify, would those be net jobs? You're either going to be letting go some of the meter readers or perhaps offering them, I don't know, jobs within the company doing something else. Is that a net gain, or are we losing 3,000 people here and adding 2,000 there.
It's a net gain, and it's a net gain of Illinois jobs. It specifies that in the legislation. These are jobs in Illinois that we're adding. And yes, we've talked about reducing the number of meter readers as we add automated meters, but so we have to take that into account and add more than the 450 to get to the 450 total.
Well, Craig Nelson, I know there's always 1,000 different aspects of this, but I think we hopefully touched on some of the major ones. We appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Well, thank you.
Thanks. You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.